My name is Nachila Lankombo. I am the Interim Executive Director for the One Campaign in Africa. We're so pleased that you could join us this morning at this press conference entitled How to End Extreme Poverty in Africa by Educating, Employing, and Empowering Africa's Young People. As all of us in this room know, Africa's population is not just growing, it's exploding. This is an existential question for the African continent. So as African stakeholders, we can sit and wait for crisis to ensure, or we can take a proactive role collectively to urge for action from government, from private sector, on what needs to be done, at least from the point of view of the One Campaign, in the next 3 years to plant the seeds that are needed to ensure that we reap a dividend out of this population explosion. We know that we cannot treat the demographic transition for Africa as business as usual, right? We should expect bold vision, leadership, and implementation with levels of efficiency that we have not seen before. Otherwise, the pockets of unrest that we've seen across the continent will probably just expand to scale. For some of you that may not know who the One Campaign is, we are a global advocacy and campaigning organization. We were founded by Bono and other activists a couple of years ago. At the time, focused on fighting for debt cancellation for poor African countries who are losing a lot of money for development, to save us debts, huge debts in rich countries. Right now, we focus on a range of issues that aim to advocate for policies and programs to end extreme poverty and disease. So we have our Africa headquarters right here in South Africa, with operations in Nigeria, in Addis Ababa, and different European capitals and Washington, D.C. So we're very pleased that we've been lucky to bring together a panel of eminent people who've been working on this issue of the demographic dividend to help us start getting sort of clear directions on practical measures we collectively need to encourage African governments to take up, to accelerate progress in responding to the dividend. So to guide us and take us through this discussion, I should take this opportunity to introduce our moderator, the amiable Bonang Mateba. As we know, Bonang is a big media personality, not only here in South Africa, but across the African continent. She has laid on a number of initiatives here in South Africa in terms of lending her voice to millions of people that follow her, not only on social media, but through her TV and radio programs. So alongside us in this room, there will be 2 million more people that are joining this conversation and will be contributing ideas in terms of how we move forward. So Bonang also is a One Campaign ambassador on our Girls Education campaign. In her own right, she runs a foundation that looks into empowering young women and making sure that they actually have opportunities to go through university education. So Bonang, over to you.
Thank you so much. Good morning, ladies and gentlemen. It really is an honor to be here, and a big thank you to Juan for inviting me. My name is Bonang Mateba, and I'm a radio and TV personality right here in South Africa. It's such an honor for me to be here, particularly because this is a topic that is so true to my heart and something I'm very, very passionate about. In 2016, the Fees Must Fall movement engulfed South Africa, where South African youth felt, they want to go to school, they can't afford to get into school. And because of that, I started the Bonang Mateba Bursary Fund. It was inspired by the Fees Must Fall movement. And through this foundation and through this fund, we're educating 10 girls through university. And hopefully in 2018 will be 20, hopefully in 2020 will be 200. And it is through this that, I've seen how many people in South Africa are desperate for education. So it's really, truly an honor for me to be sitting right here and having this discussion with everybody. But also joining us is some really important people who we're going to ask some really difficult questions to today. What is being done? So to welcome our panelists this morning, first up, Dr. Jennifer Blanke, representing a multilateral institution, the African Development Bank. She is the Vice President of Agriculture, Human and Social Development. She is responsible for overseeing the bank's strategy and activities in this area. She was previously Chief Economist at the World Economic Forum, overseeing economic research, activities and projects. She's written and lectured extensively on issues related to national competitiveness. Dr. Jennifer, welcome and thank you very much for being here.
Thank you.
Our third panelist, representing McKinsey & Company, Senior Partner, Dr. Acha Leke. Acha has a rich background in advising the world's influential governments and private sector leaders on how to improve, advance, and better. He is the co-founder of the African Leadership Network, a network of next-generation African leaders who aspire to bring prosperity to the continent. He's a young global leader at the World Economic Forum and was awarded as Africa's Young Investment Professional of the Year and as one of the top 100 movers and shakers in Africa by La Afrique Journal. So thank you very much for being here. Our next panelist, representing the World Economic Forum and civil society, community leader, regional strategies, I beg your pardon, Africa Global Leadership Fellow, World Economic Forum, Miss Vanessa Monga. I hope I'm saying your surname correctly. She advises African leaders on development strategies and creating cross-sector dialogue to influence policy making and drive sustainable growth and investment. She engages African governments and institutions in public and private cooperation projects across industries. So welcome, Vanessa, and thank you very much for being here. And last but certainly not least, from the private sector, we welcome Ms. Paminda Ver. Welcome. Thank you very much for being here. She is the Chief Executive Officer of the Tony Elumelu Foundation, a position she has held since June 2015. She has a 20-year award-winning career as film and TV producer with BBC Television, Carlton Television, and Channel 4, as well as CEO of her independent production company, Formation Films. She has produced and executive produced some of Britain's biggest events and TV shows, including the MOBO Awards and the Emma Awards. Welcome. Ladies and gentlemen, thank you very, very much for being here. Firstly, my first question I will direct to Jennifer. Can you share with us the Jobs for Youth initiative by the AFDB and how many jobs will it create and by what date exactly?
Thanks a lot, and thanks for inviting me. This is also a topic that's very close to my heart. And I think, before talking about Jobs for Youth, and I'll just say a few words before going into that, I think when you think about the job situation in Africa, it's very important to think both about supply and demand. And the bank works on both sides. So, Jobs for Youth is looking at both sides, really. But even before getting to Jobs for Youth, you have to look at the educational system. And we spend a lot of time in terms of sort of technical discussions with governments, making sure that they protect important investments into education, for example, and also looking at curricula. Given that we're sort of facing the fourth industrial revolution right now, or some sort of change in terms of the skill set that will be needed, making sure that we also bring in the private sector perspective in discussing with governments about what those curricula should look like. And I think throughout all of this, it's important for all of us to keep in mind that for anything to do with the skills and demographic dividend issues that we're discussing, it's very important to have both public and private sector at the table, as well as obviously academia and others. Turning to Jobs for Youth, we recognize that although we've been doing a lot of good work in terms of trying to encourage vocational training and things of that matter, we really had to tackle it head on through a big initiative. And what does Jobs for Youth do? It does many things, but I'll maybe just mention three. The first is in terms of looking at what the bank does. We do operations. We finance projects. And so what we're doing is we're making sure that throughout all of the work that we do, all of our collaborators in the bank are really thinking about jobs in all of their projects, in all of their operations. We're training staff to think about job creation so that if you're going to build a bridge or you're going to do something, you don't just go and do it without thinking, what is the job element? What is the vocational training aspect of it, to make sure that there's a resonance throughout the economy afterwards in terms of jobs. So that's very important, I'd say, number one. Number two, we have a number of specific projects that we're working on or initiatives. And one that's close to my heart, because I'm also overseeing agriculture, is a project called Enable Youth. And there what we do is we understand how important agriculture will be for job creation. We know that that is really the sector that is employing already so many people, and it's going to be very important for moving up the value chain. So we take young graduates and get them excited about agriculture and going into agribusiness, and we train them and we put them together with financing mechanisms and so on and so forth. So, you know, we're basically trying to make agriculture cool. And that's the second part. The third is really just direct financing. So for example, we're creating a youth entrepreneurship and innovation fund that will be directly you know, funding specific good ideas. And we have a number of such mechanisms. So we're really trying to take a multi-pronged approach. This is a complex issue, but I'm convinced that also with all of the wonderful people on the panel and also those who are here in the room and elsewhere in the Congress Center, that all of us coming together will be able to make a real difference.
Fantastic. Thank you so much, Jennifer. Asha, you have an initiative called the Generation Initiative. Before I ask you what it is that you do, can you give us a little bit more information around that particular initiative, and also how can Africans adopt and learn from that initiative?
No, thanks, Bonang, and again, thanks to One for doing this. We believe the skills issue is probably the biggest issue we face, not just on the continent, across the world. And as McKinsey, we typically advise clients on what to do. We felt this was important enough that we should actually do something ourselves. And so we set up Generation. It's a nonprofit. And we said, look, we want to, the goal is to put 1 million youth in jobs over the next 5 years. So that was our goal, quite an audacious goal. And we leverage a lot of what we learned from serving clients and looking at the education space and the employment space. And as we designed the program, we felt there were 5 things that were important. One is we wanted it to be demand-driven, right? We have too many programs that train youth and then eventually they never get jobs. We wanted it to be really employer-driven, to understand what the employers needed and to design the training program accordingly, and then have an agreement with the employers that they would then hopefully hire these students when we do that. So that's one that we think is important for these programs. 2, we want it to be scalable, right? There's 75 million youth who are unemployed, the 3 times that number who are underemployed. The interesting programs that help put 200 youth in jobs, 300, that's nice, but honestly, that doesn't move the needle. So we said, look, if we're going to do something, let's do something scalable, and that's sort of the 1 million goal that we have over 5 years. 3, we want it to be global. As McKinsey, we have offices in more than 100 countries. We thought, look, if we're going to do something, let's make sure we do it at a global level. So that's the third thing we wanted. 4, we want it to be sustainable, right? We cannot continue to rely on other people to try to fund these programs for us. It's just not sustainable. We wanted to get to a point where actually it's so successful that employers decide to pay for it. Right? We started by, as McKinsey partners, we put in $75 million to fund this. But we want to make sure that this is sustainable over time. And 5, it's measurable. We are very focused on impact, so we measure everything. Right? We measure, and I'll give you some numbers, but we measure not just how many of the youth got jobs, but how long they stay in jobs, how they're performing, and all that. So those are the 5 things. So we launched this program in 5 countries, Kenya, Brazil, India, Spain, and the US. And in 2 years, we've actually built the largest demand-driven youth unemployment program in the world, or youth employment program. We have 12,000 youth we've placed in jobs, 5,000 of whom are in Kenya. Interestingly, about 83% of the youth who come through this program actually land up with jobs. 86% stay in jobs for more than 3 months. They make on average 2 to 6 times more money than they made before they got into the program. When you survey the employers, 98% of employers say they'll hire our youth again, and 88% say that the generation people they've hired perform better than the peers, right? So quite a successful program already. Again, it's 12,000 again in a sea of 75 million youth that are employed. We're looking to scale it across the world, right? But that's a bit the program we've launched. We launched it 2 years ago, and the goal is to get to 30,000 by end of this year.
Fantastic. But, like you said, a number of African countries are financing, education and learning programs. But at the end of the day, there are 51 million African girls who are out of school. So my question to you then, what lessons can African governments draw on from other countries, to ensure that learning outcomes of our young people do contribute, to the economy, whether it's employment or entrepreneurship?
I think too much of what we do, we teach people, but we don't really teach them skills, right? So I'll give you an example. We did the survey. When you survey educational institutions, and you ask them how good a job do you do at preparing your youth for jobs when they're in school, 70% of the institutions tell you they do a very good job. when you survey employers and say, how good are the people coming out of these schools in terms of being prepared for the job, only 40% of employers say they're good, right? So there's this fundamental mismatch between what the education institutions think they're producing and what the employers need, right? So we need to, part of these programs need to bring these two together and help design it with what the employer wants in mind. That's the first thing. And second, on the women's, you're absolutely right. A lot of the people who are out of jobs are women across Africa. We have to fix that, right? We need to have some programs. I'm sure some people, colleagues here will talk about it. Our program is about 50% women, right? So we're probably around that level. But we need, in many cases, a much more conscious way to attract women and make sure they're successful through these programs.
Fantastic. Thank you so much, Asha. Vanessa, my question to you, I mean, the World Economic Forum as an international organization is a very, very powerful platform. But how do we then accelerate the progress? Because there is a sense of urgency, with African youth. They feel like something isn't being done, maybe being done, but they don't see it, they don't feel it. So how can we accelerate that progress?
Well, thank you very much, Bonang, and thank you to Juan for bringing us together. It's also an issue very close to my heart, and the World Economic Forum has been driving the agenda on the demographic dividend over the past 4 years by bringing together different partners. Because I think one of the biggest issues we're having in development in general, and especially with issues related to youth and women empowerment, is lack of collaboration. Everyone's working in silos. There's so many amazing programs, whether it's the bank, McKinsey, we'll hear from the Elumelu Foundation. There are so many solutions out there, but everyone's working in silos. So for us at the forum, the idea is to say, how can we be the platform where we bring these people together? How can we identify what works and scale it up so that we have impact faster? Because we've all been talking for a long time, all of our organizations, and everyone knows what the problem on the continent is and what's going to happen in terms of stability if youth and women are not enabled. So on the one hand, it's a matter of stability. On the other hand, it's a matter of economic growth. It's the only way to achieve inclusive growth. But it also makes human sense. It's the right thing to do. And I think education is the greatest equalizer. Everyone should have a chance at life. And so looking at empowering, educating, and employing African women and youth is the most urgent. So I think the African Union has set that agenda. They have selected the demographic dividend as the 2017 theme. So we have the leadership. Our governments are telling us they're hearing us. They know it's important. Now, what can we do to accelerate that progress? And how can we leverage the different partners from the different sectors to help them implement? So that's what the forum proposes to do on the platform. And we are very happy to be bringing people together.
Fantastic. Thank you so much, Vanessa. Pamela, my question to you. What is the Tony Elumelu Foundation doing to stimulate job creation, to stimulate entrepreneurship?
Thank you. Firstly, we're doing rather than talking. This is my introduction to the development world is just 3 years old. Previously, it was in the film and television industry. I have never heard so many people talk and do literature review about the endless challenges. But when you really look at those challenges, they are the most phenomenal opportunities. The biggest of which is the demographic dividend across this continent. This continent is going to feed the world. Agriculture is already cool amongst young Africans. 30% of the entrepreneurs we select for our program, from 20,000 applications we received in 2015, 45,000 applications that we received in 2016 from 54 countries, 3 languages, French, Portuguese, and English, and the 93,000 that we received as a result of, this is a long-term program, the Tony Elumelu Entrepreneurship Program, the 93,000 we received in 2017. 30% of the applicants that we select are agri-entrepreneurs, followed by all the other sectors. So our program is sector agnostic. So what is it? So basically it's taken one man and a vision. Tony Elumelu says that he needs to be remembered for the legacy he leaves, right? And not the size of his bank account, yeah? And he is investing as a private sector leader. He is showing that it is possible to take a long-term view in developing and harnessing the phenomenal energy, the creativity of the youth across Africa. What is being addressed here is not new. You know, in the UK, we discovered, Europe, US, there was a huge gap between what the industry needed and what the education system was churning out. We needed to bridge that gap. We needed to have people who were employable rather than just that they had qualifications, apprenticeship schemes, etc. But let me just focus on, you know, just as McKinsey, they've designed a program. Similarly, Tony Elumelu Foundation has designed a program. We've said we can bring a structured approach to many of the challenges that people continue to talk about. And our focus, and we have chosen to focus on entrepreneurship. Why? Because Tony Elumelu himself is an entrepreneur. He's made his money as an entrepreneur. He's been on a long, long journey as an entrepreneur. There's so much that he has learned as an entrepreneur, and this is his time to give back. I mean, to think that, you know, you can have a foundation located in Lagos that can connect the entire African continent through one program. So our program is long-term, it is sustainable. So we have a commitment of $100 million. And that's another thing, that the private sector, as well as governments, do need to stop talking and actually put their money where their mouth is, yeah? And with that level of investment, unprecedented investment by an African private sector leader, we've been able to design a program which you can replicate, which we can scale, which is already in 2 years or 3 years that we've been going, we've got a proof of concept. I just want to talk a little, so what is it that we're doing through the program? We're really equipping the young entrepreneurs, and the demographics are from the age of 18 to 64. We have a 64-year-old who applied and got through the program. We have the largest demographic is 21 to 37. The women, first year we had 26% women business owners who applied and got selected. And we took positive, really steps. And the step that we took was really to use the role models from the 2015. You know, the moment women see other women succeeding as businesses, that is a fantastic role model. We use them as role models to increase the number of women who applied for the program. And now we have 39%, nearly 40% of our business that we've selected for the program are women business owners. So, you know, so it's life skills. So the skills through our 12-week training program are going to be skills that entrepreneurs are going to take forever and ever and ever. Because once you start a business, you want to start another, you want to start another. We've already reached out to AFDB and many other multinational donor agencies to say, we designed a program, please take it. You can white label it as your program. We built the infrastructure. We've spent $10 million in the last 2 years directly going as seed capital to the entrepreneurs. On top of that, we built a data bank of nearly 3,000 mentors from around the world. Everybody wants to mentor young African entrepreneurs. Last night, we were at an event where YPO hosted us and entrepreneur organizers. Amongst them were also our Tony Elumelu entrepreneurs, and that already many of those YPOs are going to take on the entrepreneurs as in terms of how they've, connect with their businesses. Mentoring is really critical. Network. The elephant in the room is the isolated entrepreneurs. I think we have to think beyond initiatives and actually say, how do we build long-term sustainable networks that entrepreneurs certainly can leverage? So we have Africa's largest entrepreneurship network. And then, I think, again, we've heard earlier that you have to think holistically. You can't say, I'll give you a bit of this, I'll give you a bit of this. And our holistic approach is also added to that is the seed capital. For me, there are the young people, the demographic dividend is where the solutions lie to many of the challenges that we talk about. And we would love to partner, because what is our challenge now is how do we manage our success? Yeah? And how is it that we have entrepreneurs across the 54 countries? And what we want to do is to say, okay, guys, we've got a structure, we've done a proof of concept. Now, can we begin to work with all the other agencies, as you've said, who are working in silos, often reinventing the wheel, and I think wasting a lot of resources, yeah? When we can invest that in the skills development of young people. Start teaching entrepreneurship at school. and at universities. Yeah? Say to people, your mindset should be about job creation and not job seekers.
Yeah, that's fantastic. Unfortunately, I have to cut you there because we've run out of time. But my last question to the panelists today, and Pamindir, you said earlier on that, you know, it's all about talking, 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 and the World Economic Forum, the African Union summits, forums like this are always accused of just talking, 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 but I think right now we need action, you know, we need a sense of urgency. So my last question to all of you is, what advice then do we give, or should we give to governments and the private sector? What is the first thing they need to do on Monday morning? I'll start with you, Rasha.
I mean, I would say, you know, two quick things. One is there's too much focus on training and not enough on actually putting people in jobs. So really focusing on putting people in jobs, not just training. Training itself doesn't get you there. And two is, you know, find, I think what Vanessa said, find some programs that work and help scale them, right? That's what I would suggest.
Fantastic, Vanessa.
Well, to governments, reach out, partners. But I think for me, it's also what's our own commitments. Because it's one thing to always say government should do this, government should do that. So what are we willing to do? And I know we, as the World Economic Forum, as of Monday morning, will continue to seek to have these organizations work together to scale up those programs that work. Because I love everything I'm hearing, and I think it needs to be scaled up urgently.
Absolutely, I agree, Jen.
I think, not to repeat what was already said, to understand perhaps that in a way Africa has a second mover advantage in many of these things, and to really stand back very quickly and take stock of, you know, what is needed and what they have already, and while reaching out, build the sorts of systems that are needed for the future.
Fantastic, Nashila.
Well, a quick point. I think what's super critical is that we have the data to better understand the economic opportunities that exist in each African economy. And also we make sure that we have accountability mechanisms that are going to put young people at the center of this. We can't come to the next World Economic Forum and analyze and be talking about the number of young people that are getting into the job market. So we need a greater sense of agency, clarity, and boldness on the actions that individual African countries need to take going forward. But also, within that scheme of things, we know that young people are not homogeneous. Young women face extra barriers in terms of accessing education, accessing employment opportunity, and ensuring that they have a voice. So making sure that we don't just have wholesale monolithic policies, but we have policies that are properly targeted. I think we have a senior minister from Ghana, and maybe before you wrap it up, it would be great to hear his thoughts, because our main concern is that we know our leaders know what needs to be done, but we feel there isn't a greater sense of agency to really, you know, create this dividend.
Fantastic. I'll throw it to the audience in a few minutes. Pamindir?
So I think back and Made in Africa, by an African, for Africans program, the Tony Elumelu Entrepreneurship Program, is a proof of concept that works, it's a design that works. Take it, white label it, invest. All you would need to bring, all the government and anybody needs to bring is seed capital, yeah? I think secondly, to really help partner with us to scale this program, to replicate this program. Don't go off and design, because it takes enormous amount of resources to design the infrastructure of a program. We've done it. Come partner with us and take the program. You can launch it in Cote d'Ivoire, in Senegal, in Mali, across the 54 African countries, which is what this program is. And then I think finally for us is, as our entrepreneurs graduate, entrepreneurs need a constant investment, and it's not money investment. It's knowledge, it's information, it's skills, yeah? Come and be the value-add partners with the Tony Elumelu Foundation, and we will give you access to an investable pipeline that we have built over the last 2 years, and we will continue to build for the next 10 years.
Well, thank you. A big thank you to our panelists. I'm going to throw it to the audience if you have any questions that you'd like to ask our panelists.
I asked the question to the senior minister.
Yes,
so.
we're just getting you a microphone, sir. Thank you very much. Thank you, Nashila.
Thank you very much, and good morning to everybody.
Good morning.
Good morning.
A new government came to power in Ghana on the 7th of January this year, on the back of education, solving unemployment, and feeding ourselves. Ghana, with all the arable land, spends about $400 million US on importing rice. And therefore, we decided to launch on the 19th of April, planting for food and jobs. It's a very massive agricultural project, and we recalled all young graduates in the country who have finished universities within the last 5 years and have no jobs to do to become agriculture extension officers. We've given each one of them 6 weeks of training, because one of the problems we have is teaching the individual farmers the good practices, providing improved seeds, fertilizer, etc. You need extension officers to make this go deep, and we've decided to do that. We also have free primary education in Ghana since 1960, but the quality is not what we really want. You talk about education, you must be talking about the teacher. The teacher is the center of quality education and deep education. And therefore, we also introduced on the 1st of March special incentives for teachers throughout the country to enable them feel good and provide better education. We are taking every teacher through an orientation of another 4 weeks. We have energy problem as a country, a serious one. And therefore, we decided to open our arms. We now have a hydro, thermal, very little of renewable energy. We are asking PPP, we are asking private participation in all renewable energy. That's the area we are putting it up. And we have the PURC, the agency that is responsible for providing good pricing for those who want to come in, the Public Utility Regulatory Board, so that we will have arrangements that will enable people come in, provide thermal, and provide renewable energy as a good source. We think that we are determined, because we want the elections on the back of education, on the back of creating jobs. We are working very hard to get this done. It is a shame that Africa imports $35 billion of food with that quality of land we have.
Crazy.
And the projection is to import 120 billion. It cannot happen. I think we should aim and we should attract our development partners to help Africa feed itself. That would be a very good first step. Amen. If we are able to feed ourselves, half the battle is done. Because in the process, we'll create employment as well. We'll have the added value.
Thank you, sir. Thank you. Thank you very, very much. We'll take a question at the back there. We've run out of time, unfortunately, so we'll take 1 or 2 questions.
2 questions.
2 questions. We'll start, ladies first. Thank you.
My name is Sophie Mkwen. I'm the foreign editor at SABC. I just want to find out that your politics are quite challenging right now. You speak about young people and how to empower them so that we can eradicate poverty, educate them, and empower them in terms of skills. But the geopolitics are changing. What is it that needs to be done to prepare them for this changing world? You look at what's happening in America, the current policy there. You look at what's happening in France, the fear that the elections might go a different way. Look at Brexit. How do we empower young people to understand the changing world?
Thank you. Is that question for specific panelists or just anyone? Anybody? All right, who wants to take it? Jennifer?
I could take a shot at
Thank
that
you.
one.
Thank
Look,
you.
I mean, I think that first I'll say, and this is something that our president says quite regularly, the future of African youth is not in Europe, it's not in the United States, it's in Africa. And so I think, yes, you have to have some understanding of what's changing in the world, but probably have, in order to be able to do business here and have good jobs, but, maybe not get so worried about the politics elsewhere. The other thing I would just say, a lot of reflection is going into what the future, labor market will look like. Nobody has a crystal ball. However, the private sector at least knows where we're standing now. It's sort of like looking out the window and knowing whether it's raining right now. And so I'd say a really strong engagement with the private sector, all sectors, to have a sense of what they need in terms of skill sets, and then have very adaptable educational systems and vocational training systems which teach people to think. Obviously, STEM is part of it, science, technology, math, but also the sorts of soft skills that help you to adapt over time. And I think with these things and a real understanding that the future of African youth is not only in Africa, but in large part in Africa, I think that helps.
Thank you so much, Jennifer. Last question, sir. Thank you very much.
My name is Ibrahim Mustafa, a global shipper from Ghana, Tamal Hub. My question is, looking forward, how can we structure our educational system to be more of an incubation type of universities so that when you enter into the university, you can start your business instead of the classroom models that we run. And the other concern is, how can we make sure that our lecturers rather go for the internships and the attachments rather than solving it from a bottom-up approach whereby we force students to go. But if the lecturers also go for the internship and attachments, they get updated as to what's happening so that they can help the educational system.
I'm happy to give a few thoughts on that. So I'm involved in something called the Africa Leadership University, which is exactly that. We said, look, if you're going to fix this problem at the university level, to your point, today we have 50 million Africans who graduate high school every year. The university slots for only 6 million, right? And that's just access, not quality, right? So if we use the traditional model, we'll never get there, right? We need to build 50 Harvard-like universities every year for the next 20 years to close that gap relative to India, right? We're never going to get there. So we need to think a lot more creatively. So one idea, what we're doing today, we have 2 universities, one in Mauritius, one in Rwanda, and we're looking to scale it up across 20 African countries. One is each year you spend 8 months on campus, but 4 months in internship, right? So actually, by the time you finish your 3-year degree, you spend a year on the job. So you've learned a lot, right? That's one. 2 is, again, the professor doesn't have all the knowledge anymore, right? And so we do a lot of peer learning. You learn the best by actually having to teach somebody something, right? So there's a lot of peer learning that happens there. Then you also leverage technology. Now we have technology that allows you to scale up. So the new models that exist today, and the question again to your point is, how do you take some of those that people are testing out and scale it across the continent? But happy to chat more about it.
Fantastic. All right, we only have a couple of minutes left. So Pelinda, I'm going to get a comment from you, and then you, Hashilala, you can give us closing remarks, please.
Just very quickly on the academic institution, they are at the heart of our entrepreneurship program. We have networked across the 54 African countries, working with the academic institutions for 2 things. One is to really make entrepreneurship a vital part of their curriculum, which they are doing, either setting up separate enterprise centers or really introducing enterprise and entrepreneurship in the whole of the education programs. No matter what you are, a doctor, whatever you've trained as an accountant, you know there is a business that you can build behind that particular skill, that particular education. The other is really also working with those academic institutions. We're sitting on a most extraordinary data of entrepreneurs across 54 African countries. 200,000 plus entrepreneurs have come to our platform, and we're working with academic institutions to turn that data to produce analysis and which shows trends and insights which can really help policymakers, governments, MDOs, NGOs, and academic institutions in creating an enabling business environment for entrepreneurs across the continent.
Fantastic, thank you so much. Closing comments from you, Shilala?
Okay, very quickly, I think we know what needs to be done, and I think from our perspective is really ensuring that we can urge governments, all of us, to provide the leadership that is needed on this particular issue. The demographic disaster, if it happens, will not discriminate private sector from government sector to media sector. We all need to play our role in making sure that we're advocating for the education that is needed to support industry and create opportunity. We're having policy and business environments that are supporting entrepreneurship and employment. And then also the government needs to actually step up in terms of making sure that young people are not only participating in the development process, but governments are investing in what President Adesina calls the grey matter infrastructure. We have millions of young people in Africa, actually children that are malnourished, right? We cannot build the economy of Africa on the basis of millions of malnourished people. So we need really a sense of agency moving forward. We need a sense of accountability, and it's not something that the World Economic Forum will do on its own, one campaign will do on its own. We all need to move together, and we're really counting on you as the media to really shine a spotlight on the disaster that's coming up ahead if we don't see bold and efficient action from this point onward.
Yeah, and it's a great opportunity, but I think most importantly, it's a huge challenge. Yeah. And a challenge that all of us at One are really, really passionate about, a conversation that we want to, keep participating in, and it won't stop today, like you said. So with that said, ladies and gentlemen, thank you very, very much for joining us this morning. A big thank you to our panelists. It was a wonderful discussion, and we've run out of time, so thank you once again for being here. Have a wonderful morning. Thank you.